Today we're going to pick back up where we last left off in the middle of chapter 1 on the deep analysis that I'm doing on the book, The Power of Now. So if you haven't yet watched the first part of chapter 1, make sure to watch that here. I'll link it up here, okay? And I'm also going to make a whole playlist of these videos that I'm doing in order. So watch the video first and then watch this one. Last time we left off on page 17, freeing yourself from the mind. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Eckhart said, so let's begin here. Eckhart says most people live with a tormentor in their head that continuously attacks and punishes them and drains them of vital energy. It is the cause of untold misery and unhappiness, as well as of disease. So he's saying, now you need to switch from being the thinker of thoughts to being the watcher of the thinker. He says, be there as the witnessing presence. Simply listen to the voice in your head and be there as the witnessing presence. Rather than assuming the role of the one that is thinking thoughts, recognize yourself to be, and recognize this ability even while you're watching this video, even like right after you watch the video and maybe you're just sitting for a while. Recognize whatever thoughts that are coming in your head. You don't necessarily need to take ownership of those thoughts. And if you really look, the thoughts do whatever they're doing, but you have the ability to watch those thoughts. This instantly places you in a deeper place, in a place prior to thoughts. And it detaches you from being the thinker of those thoughts. No longer are you grasping the identity as mind, as the thinking that's happening. Now you're creating the space between what you really are and the thinking that's happening. This itself is the beginning of freedom. Eckhart says, when you listen to that voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge. So you're simply watching the thoughts, because the thoughts are always going to be about something going on about in your life, something you care about, something maybe you fear. So they're going to be very, very intriguing. They're going to constantly pull you into identification because there's interest there. So for the time being, while you are watching these thoughts, let go of interest. Let go of whatever the content of those thoughts are, and instead simply watch impartially. This is what will give rise to that greater awareness, to the recognition of what you really are, and it will create the space. It will increase the space between I and the thinker and the thoughts. You'll soon realize that there is the voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. This I am realization, this sense of your own presence, is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind. So this recognition that I am, it is not a thought. A thought may come in after that says I am, or I recognize that I am. But the actual recognition happening here in this moment, the recognition of I am aware, I am present, or simply I am. Awareness on awareness. Being aware of being aware. And do it with me while I'm speaking to you right now. Become aware of the fact that you are aware. You'll notice that this recognition right here is thoughtless. Thought may arise then to interpret what just happened, but that is secondary. This recognition itself is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind, from a deeper place, where you already are. Who is it recognizing that I am? It is I. Therefore, you are already in that place. It is not somewhere you get to or become. You already are that. And that is, you can say, this feeling, this natural sense I am, your natural presence. It's the declaration of consciousness, you can say. Consciousness declares itself as I am. Consciousness is I am. It is not separate. It does not say I am. It is. We can just leave it right there. Consciousness is. So Eckhart says, with practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end to its depth. So in the beginning, you can very faintly sense this presence. This presence is always here. It is what you are, essentially. But this presence is completely neglected because we are constantly too occupied with what we are aware of, what we are giving attention to, whatever is arising, whatever thought or experience it may be. We completely neglect the underlying presence, which is always here. But with this practice, simply watching your thoughts throughout the day, or being the watcher of experience, doing this sort of impartial seeing, impartial observing, without interest, simply just observing for the sake of observing, not analyzing. Analyzing is mind. Interpreting is mind. Simply just observing. With this practice, this recognition, this stillness, this peace will deepen. And if you're new to this, and what I speak of right now is like not in your experience, that's okay. But know that with practice, this deepens. I remember when I first read this book, I really didn't know exactly what he was speaking about. And a couple of years ago, and when I used to practice it, I had a sense of, okay, this presence, but it didn't mean much to me. Let alone I wish I knew at that time that presence itself is what I was searching for. My mind was making it out to be so complex that I don't get it yet, or this and that. And you may be going through that right now too. But it's much more simple than you think. It is just your very natural sense of presence. Keep your attention on that. Be more interested in that, as simple as it may sound, as simple as it is. Because even though right now it may not seem like anything, this is the key. This is the beginning of freedom from identification with mind. So Eckhart says, instead of watching the thinker, you can also intentionally create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. And so this allows you to just disengage from thought activity and be here now. As I said previously, that consciousness declares itself as I am. That sense is consciousness. Well, while that's true, the now, what you feel as the now, is also another quality, you can say, of consciousness. Consciousness is the now. What you experience as the now is what you are seeking for. It is what you essentially are. And that is why your experience is always in the now. You have never experienced a past or future. So what keeps you out of the now? First of all, nothing. You are always in the now. But what keeps your attention away from the now? It is the mind. Until your attention is not here, until it is in mind, your attention will always be occupied with perceptions and thoughts of past and perceptions and thoughts of future, imagination. While they serve their own purpose for practical reasons, it is not at all necessary throughout the day that you keep being in mind. So mind, in order to keep you in a state of identification with it, it needs to constantly keep your attention. And it keeps you away from the now by keeping your attention. Because the more you keep your attention in the now, the more this illusion starts to lose its control over you. The more you start to actually pierce through the illusion, the more you start to dissolve identification with the mind. So Eckhart says, if watching the thoughts themselves doesn't, it's not something that resonates with you, Then you can intentionally, multiple times throughout the day, and especially during your meditations, intentionally and purposefully drop all thoughts, even if it's for a second or two before more thoughts come in. Just intentionally disengage from all thought activity and become intensely present right here and now. In the beginning, it will take effort, but over time, it becomes very, very easy and simple. And learn to train your attention to be here now. The people that I work with, if it's a beginner, I usually instruct them to do this at least 10 times a day. Catching yourself thinking, and then whatever the thought may be, however important it is projecting that it is, letting go of it, disengaging from all thoughts, and simply just being fully alert, fully present here and now. And you will see that this little practice, as simple as it is, it starts to really flow greater and greater awareness throughout your day. And it opens up the door for the recognition of what I am. And you can also practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is just a means to an end and giving it your fullest attention so that it becomes an end in and of itself. So washing your hands, you don't need to be thinking while you're washing your hands. The mind portrays this illusion that you need to constantly be thinking in order to come up with solutions, solve problems. It's not true. Matter of fact, it creates further complexity, creates further problems and friction in your external life when it keeps you thinking. So take any routine activity, washing your hands, driving, washing the dishes, taking a shower, sitting in your room, doing whatever, right? Bring your attention fully here and do the activity with full attention. Right now, I'm making this video, full attention here. It does not matter to me what is coming up. No care at all. Simply this. This is all that exists right now. Being so fully here and so fully alive. And I'm sure that this presence itself is translating over into your screen right now, even if you're watching this a year later. So I want you to be as present as I am right now while making this video as you are watching this video. Because it will, like, if you practice it now, it will actually give you an understanding of what you are supposed to do. So practice it while you're watching this video itself. Don't wait. Again, you go into waiting, you're already stepping into mind. You're already stepping into past and future. Catch yourself, come back. So it's all about bringing your attention again and again back under your control and into the now. Eckhart says the single most vital step on your journey towards enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. Every single time, you can say you're wearing this necklace, and this necklace represents the ongoing thought activity. Every single time you create a gap by simply becoming very, very present intentionally, creating a gap in the stream of thought, you're cutting that necklace little by little. And eventually the necklace will just fall off. And this itself will wake you up to what you really are. Learning to disidentify from the mind is the single most vital step in this whole process. And is very, very simple. Being without thought. Being as you are. Eckhart also says that 80 to 90% of most people's thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but it's actually very, very dysfunctional and negative in nature. So it's harmful, and it causes a serious leakage of vital energy. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure that invariably turns into pain. So I remember, when I used to be a huge overthinker before I kind of awoke into this. The constant thinking gives you a sense of pleasure. Even thinking about your problems, thinking about how much life sucks, it gives the ego a sense of pleasure. And it needs this thinking to constantly go and go and go and go in order to maintain its existence. This thinking is the veil of cloud over your true self. And in order for the ego to maintain its phantom existence, it needs to maintain this layer of cloud over your true self. When we begin to pierce through this cloud simply by becoming mentally quiet more and more and more, being the watcher, now our identity as the ego starts to dissolve, and our sense of self begins to shift from ego to its true position, what we really are, the self, awareness, consciousness. This false sense of self that claims to be the thinker of your thoughts, that claims to be that declares itself, I am this body, I am this thought. That is what we call the ego. And the ego has phantom existence. It doesn't have any actual reality. It doesn't have any actual existence. It itself is another thought. And once you become the watcher of it, it starts to flee very, very quickly. So there's a funny example by Sri Ramana Maharishi. He says, the ego can only maintain its reality until it becomes questioned. Once you begin to question the ego, once you really begin to observe and inquire, what truly am I? The ego flees. The ego really flees. And the example that he gives is that, let's say you're in a wedding, right? In the wedding, there's a person that nobody knows. There's this one person that nobody knows. The bride side of the family believes that it's that person is from the groom side of the family, right? Probably like a family friend or something. But the groom side of the family also doesn't know him, and they think he's from the bride side of the family. And until, while no one questions it, the guy's just having fun and, crashing the wedding and having a blast. Only once people start catching on and they begin to question, begin to inquire, now the wedding crasher, right, that ego, that person starts to sense everybody's suspicion, and it flees. It leaves right away because it knows it will be caught. So just in that way, once the ego comes under your observation, once you establish yourself as the deeper presence, which is aware of even the ego, the thinker of thoughts, the one that claims it's the doer of actions. Once this becomes under your observation, now this identification begins to dissolve. Because now, if I am the observer of even the ego and in all of its tendencies, then what am I? I previously thought that I was the ego. By ego, it's what I mean is your identity, meaning I am Sunny, I am John, I am Lisa. These are the ideas that we have of who we really are. The phantom self that continues to operate as I, but what I really is something different. It's what this book is trying to wake you up to. So once you begin to really observe and create the gaps in the stream of thought, ego begins to flee because it needs to constantly perpetuate this cloud of thought in order to perpetuate its own existence. And as long as we remain asleep to it, we never question it, and it continues to have a blast at the party. And it keeps everything in your life and you in control. Only once you start to question it, starts to dissolve quite quickly. And that's also why the ego, it's always concerned with keeping the past alive. Because without the past, it has no sense of identity. So that is why it also loves ruminating in thoughts constantly. Because it needs to uphold its identity. It needs to derive its identity from this happened, then this happened, then this suffering happened, then this amazing thing happened that I achieved. And through that, it creates a story. It creates time. It creates more psychological time through which it creates a sense of identity for you. And it needs to continue to do this. And it does so by thinking constantly. So Eckhart says, the present moment holds the key to liberation. But you cannot find the present moment as long as you are your mind. So if you are the ego, you will always be in past and future mind. If you are falsely identified as the ego, that is to say. Now, in order to be yourself, to recognize what you really are, the present moment is the key. Because the present moment is essentially what you are. The presence within which all this activity, within which even the ego is appearing and disappearing, is what you are. Thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. So think about it. Have you ever had a thought which you weren't conscious of, which you weren't aware of? But have you been aware while there was no thought here? So you see, thought relies on you being aware of it to exist. But you exist with or without thought. All enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought, the level of animal or plant. It actually means to transcend mind itself, to transcend intellect, ego. So now on page 25, the section on emotions. Eckhart says, the more you are identified with your thinking, your likes and dislikes, judgments and interpretations, which is to say, the less present you are as the watching consciousness, right? Because when you're identified with your thinking and your likes and dislikes, that is ego right there. So the less present you are as the watching consciousness, the awareness, the stronger the emotional energy charge will be, whether you are aware of it or not. So the emotions that you feel throughout the day, the greater significance you have given to your identity, the greater significance that you have given to your likes, dislikes, like all these things, to your thoughts themselves, to the meaning that you give to events, the greater that meaning, the more intense you feel emotions. So let's just say, I use this example all the time. You lose your job. And if you give it that meaning where it's like, this is a catastrophic event, this means like, I don't know what this is going to mean, and you're just lost in your thoughts about how this is such a bad event, I don't know what this is going to mean for my future and all that. The more meaning the more belief you are placing, the more identity you are placing in those thoughts, those beliefs, those meanings, the more intensely you will feel these emotions. And that is to say, the less present you are, the more intense this roller coaster will be. Constant ups and downs. Whereas the physical always will have some aspect of an up and down, because that's the nature of the physical. But once you are learning to recognize what you truly are and abiding as the watching presence, the consciousness, now the pull of the ups and downs will be less on you. You will still be able to enjoy the ups, but when it's down, it won't have such a strong pull on you. It won't make you suffer. And there will still be the capacity to appreciate what is right now. So Eckhart says, one of the best ways to deal with emotions is to allow the emotion to be there without being controlled by it. And this requires you to just be the watcher of the emotion. So rather than reacting to your anger and what it's trying to make you do, rather than reacting to your sadness and what it's trying to make you do, simply watch the sadness. Allow yourself to feel the sadness. Allow the sadness to be there without being controlled by it. This is a power you have. Don't fight against what I'm saying. Try to open yourself up to the possibility of what I'm saying. In this way, you no longer are the emotion. You are the watcher, the observing presence. If you practice this, all that is unconscious in you will be brought into the light of consciousness. And the more stuff that comes up, you can just be the watcher of it, and it will dissolve. So many of the traumas that you have, many of the attachments, fears, limiting beliefs, if you simply just allow those things to surface and the emotions associated with them just to surface and allow them to be, rather than fighting against them or getting rid of them or trying to suppress them or distract yourself away from them, if you just allow them to be and just be with them, being the watcher of them, they dissolve. I have dissolved so much pain in my body through my previous illness, through this method, simply being the watcher of the pain. I've dissolved so many limiting tendencies and ideas and emotions and self-critical attitude and feelings and lack of self-worth, like all these things, through just this method. And this is a method that I now also teach in detail in my programs because it is so effective. And everybody that I have put through this method, it is effective every time. And there's a reason for that. The truth is always simple. The mind wants these flashy techniques and gimmicks, but it is the simple things that are in alignment with the truth. Complexity is mind generated. So make it a habit to ask yourself, what's going on inside me in this moment? And then pay attention to that, right? That question will point you in the right direction. But don't analyze, don't interpret, just watch. Focus your attention within. And just learn to check in with yourself now. And start to give what emotion is here, what sensation is here, whatever is here, just giving your attention, impersonal attention, not wanting anything out of it, not wanting to get rid of it, not trying to change it, just allowing it to be. And watch how this practice evolves. It does take presence in order for you to simply watch an emotion rather than being triggered by the emotion and thinking about it and thinking about who caused it and what to do about it now, right? So the emotion wants to take you over, and it usually succeeds unless there's enough presence in you. So the more you practice this, the more this presence grows, and the more this ability to not be controlled by your emotions also grows. So no longer are you a puppet to your emotions and the external. Now you're actually coming into control of your own being, of your own experience. All emotions are modifications of one primordial, undifferentiated emotion that has its origin in the loss of awareness of who you are beyond name and form. Because of its undifferentiated nature, it is hard to find a name that precisely describes this emotion. Fear comes close, but apart from the continuous sense of threat, it also includes a deep sense of abandonment and incompleteness. Losing yourself as awareness, meaning forgetting yourself as awareness and stepping into this mental identity of I am this, separate from all that is. It comes with a deep-rooted sense, so you can say ego. Ego comes with a deep-rooted sense of lack, of a deep sense of abandonment and incompleteness, which we feel as fear. The more you feel as a separate entity from all that is, the more separate you feel, the more you feel that as fear. The more one you feel as the awareness, as the source, as what you truly are, the more you come into this oneness, the more you feel love. And that's why the source of love, they say, is within you. You are that love. You are that oneness. You are that awareness within which all the separation is known. So all emotions are basically just modifications of this one sense of incompleteness. They're all just programs of the ego. Through this practice of watching the emotions impartially, you are now learning to transcend emotions. Emotions are also just mind. We're learning to transcend emotions back into recognizing that I am that one awareness. Eckhart says you will not be free of the pain until you cease to derive your sense of self from identification with mind, which is to say from ego. So as much as the mind hates the pain and the suffering, it low-key loves it. And it finds a twisted pleasure from it because it gives it a further sense of identity. So the more you focus on your suffering, the more you focus on your problems, on your pain, the more you will actually perpetuate it. And until you let go of seeking a sense of identity in these things, unless you start to be the watcher of the thinker and all these things that it's projecting, until that happens, you will always be in pain. You will always be in these thoughts, and you will suffer these thoughts. Only the idea that you have of yourself, right, this mental identity, can suffer from its projections. What you are never suffers. What you are is already free of that. And you just have to recognize this. So freedom, as always, as every great master says, is already here. You just have to wake up to it. How? Be here as you are. Step out of mind and be here as you already are. And you are free. So the question, what about positive emotions such as love and joy? Eckhart says they are inseparable from your natural state of interconnectedness with being. Right? So the love, happiness, joy, these aren't even emotions. You can say these are qualities of that oneness. Just like water is wet and it's fluid. Just like that, the self, this awareness, it is happiness. It is love. It is peace. So the one that projects to be separate from it, the ego, its entire existence is in search for this oneness. It's in search for this peace and happiness, but it seeks it in experience, in fleeting experience, and it never finds it there. It sees it in only temporary fleeting moments. We can only recognize this peace by letting go of identification with ego, by going within and recognizing our self as that self. It's the only way. Peace, happiness, and love are not some things to be attained or achieved. They are nowhere to be found in experience, nowhere to be found in mind. They are your natural state. They are what naturally surface once you learn to be here as you are, rather than be the mind. Within stillness, there is a subtle but intense joy. There is love, there is peace. Don't go looking for this, but simply become present and let it come on its own time. Let yourself recognize it. Don't chase these states, okay? Because the chase itself is coming from the mind. The mind's like, okay, I'll do this so that I can feel this way. Let that go. Even let that thought go. Be the watcher of even that thought. Love, joy, and peace are deep states of being, or rather 3 aspects of the state of interconnectedness with being. As such, they have no opposite. This is because they arise from beyond the mind. He says pleasure is always derived from something outside of you, whereas joy arises from within. And this peace, joy, and happiness that is your true nature is simply just obscured by that layer of mind, the thick cloud. So simply be there as the observer of mind. Instead of quoting the Buddha, be the awakened one, which is what the word Buddha means. Pain is inevitable as long as you are identified with your mind, which is to say, as long as you are unconscious, spiritually speaking. And every emotional pleasure or emotional high contains within itself the seed of pain, its inseparable opposite, which will manifest in time. So as long as you continue to derive your happiness and joy from these little fleeting things where you feel it for moments at a time, they will eventually turn into suffering. The mind, there is, as I said, the ego has this deep-rooted sense of fear and lack. Even if you place the ego in its paradise, what would it consider its paradise? It will still eventually find a way to suffer it. So don't seek joy outside. It's okay to have goals and all that stuff. Go for them, but never make the mistake of believing that happiness is somewhere in the future and must be attained through the achievement or attainment of something. This is a cycle for setting yourself up for misery and disappointment. So, my friend, that was chapter 1. I know a long one, but we finally got through it in 2 parts. I'm very, very happy to do these videos, and I'm very happy the depth to which we take them. So if you have been watching it this far, I don't even know how much time has it been now. If you have been watching it this far, let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear who has gone through this entire video. If you want me to make more of these, if you want me to continue going through this entire book, please let me know in the comment section below as well. Again, if you want to dissolve identification with the ego and you want to realize your true self and you want to work with me one-on-one to really help you through this process, my program details are down below, so check that out if you like. I'm also offering a free masterclass. It's called the From Ego to Presence Masterclass. Shifting from ego to presence, dissolving identification with the mind. It's completely free. It's 1 hour long. It dives much deeper into this whole process. So if you want to watch that, again, it's free. Link is also in the description box below and in the first comment of this video. All right. Otherwise, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video.